Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. I want you to think about something for a moment. Why do some people remain poor, even when the world around them is getting so much richer? It's a truly heartbreaking reality, isn't it? We often see towering, glittering skyscrapers built just a few miles away from struggling, impoverished villages. Well, today, we are going to look very closely at this exact divide, this deep, painful feeling of being left behind. We're exploring a deeply moving, emotionally charged piece of literature that captures this human struggle perfectly. We are analyzing A Roadside Stand by the legendary American poet Robert Frost. Now, Frost is widely famous for his beautiful writings on nature and rural life, but in this particular poem, he is deeply, almost painfully sympathetic towards ordinary, deprived people. He presents their lives with pitiless clarity and profound humanity. He highlights the stark economic gap between villages and cities, exposing the emotional pain of the poor who are simply ignored by the wealthy. Oh, and before we dive into the text, a quick reminder, if this explainer helps you understand English literature a bit better, please do like, share, and subscribe to the ACE Archive. Your support really helps us create more of these CBSE explanations, poem analyses, and exam prep guides for you. All right, let's quickly chart out our path for today. We'll start with the context and setting. Then look at the clash between the traffic and the stand. After that, we'll unpack the false promises made to these villagers, dive into the poet's anguish, break down the crucial literary devices, and wrap up with some solid exam prep. By the end of this, you will be completely ready for your board exams. So let's set the scene with the context and setting, the Great Economic Divide. Frost immediately places us at the literal intersection of two very different worlds, the fast-paced, wealthy city and the stagnant, struggling countryside. He opens by describing a very humble, quiet scene. The little old house was out with a little new shed, in front at the edge of the road where the traffic sped. Just picture it, an old, modest house that has just put up a temporary, recently renovated shop, a little shed, right by the edge of the highway. And right past this little stand, the city cars are traveling at incredibly high speeds. The traffic sped. Right away, students, we see a powerful contrast. The static, hopeful little stand on one side versus the fast, completely indifferent traffic on the other. The poet says this roadside stand pathetically plead. It is in a pitiful condition, almost like it's making an earnest, desperate request to the passersby. But Frost is very quick to clarify something absolutely crucial here. He says it would not be fair to say for a dole of bread. The villagers are not begging. They are not asking for charity or a free handout of food. They are offering goods, hoping for a fair trade. They just want to earn a little bit of city money to improve their standard of living and keep their lives from sinking. Which brings us to our next point. How exactly does the city respond to this earnest plea? Let's examine the attitude of the polished traffic and how they treat the stand. These villagers are offering simple, honest, farm-fresh goods. They have wild berries in wooden quarts and crook-necked golden squash with silver warts. Yet the rich people in their sophisticated cars just speed by with a mind ahead. Their eyes are completely fixed on their own destinations. They overlook the roadside stand entirely. And on the rare occasion they do stop aside for a moment, they certainly don't buy anything. Instead, they get upset. Notice this stark, tragic contrast here. The villagers are literally fighting for basic survival. They just want the cash that supports the flower of cities from withering. But the city dwellers, when they stop, they only complain. They complain that the artless paint of the stands spoils their scenic mountain view. They complain that the north and south signs are turned the wrong way. They think the goods are unhygienic. Frost points out how painfully ignorant, selfish, and callous this is. He implies if you have money but want to be so mean, why keep your money crossly and just go along? Now, the poem shifts, and we enter the territory of false promises and political exploitation. Frost's tone turns from quiet observation to a deep, simmering frustration. Because you see, the apathy of the city drivers is only half the problem. The other half is the systemic exploitation of these rural poor by those in power. The villagers hope that a little city money will help their lives expand. They dream of the luxurious, advanced lifestyle they see in the movies, the life of the moving pictures. And this is exactly what politicians promise them during election campaigns, right? But once the party is actually in power, they keep those promises far away from the villagers. It is in the news that these pitiful kin are going to be gathered in, relocated next to the theater and the store to live comfortably. But students, it is entirely a deception. Now, what's really brilliant about Frost's writing here is his use of contradiction to describe these exploiters. He calls them greedy good-doers and beneficent beasts of prey. Think about that. These politicians and agencies swarm over the villagers' lives, enforcing benefits that are meticulously calculated to soothe them out of their wits. They make the innocent villagers complacent, teaching them how to sleep all day while simultaneously destroying their ancient way of living. They keep them trapped in misery. It is an incredibly harsh, biting critique of political hypocrisy. Watching this endless cycle of false hope and daily disappointment deeply affects the poet. This brings us to Frost's own emotional helplessness, his intense anguish over this childish longing that is entirely in vain. Frost writes that he can hardly bear the thought of so much childish longing in vain. I want you to picture the faces of these villagers standing near the open window of the roadside stand. The poet describes them as waiting all day in almost open prayer for the squeal of brakes. They are desperately, silently praying for the sound of a stopping car. Out of 1,000 selfish cars that pass, they just want one, to inquire what the farmer's prices are. And here is the bitter, heartbreaking irony. Sometimes a car actually does stop. But why? Never to buy the squash or the berries. One stops just to use the yard to back up and turn around, violently plowing up the grass. Another stops to ask for directions. And yet another stops to ask if the vegetable stand sells a gallon of gas. It's a completely heedless, ridiculous question that only deepens the profound dejection of the poor villagers and fuels the intense irritation of the poet. So how does Frost construct all this emotion technically? Let us shift gears into pure exam mode now, as mastering these literary devices is absolutely high yield for your CBSE boards. Let's carefully break down these figures of speech. Frost uses personification when he says the stand pathetically pled. He's giving a simple wooden structure the human emotion of desperate pleading. He uses a metaphor with flower of cities, which beautifully represents the luxury and cash flow that keeps city life vibrant. We see an incredibly powerful oxymoron in greedy good doers and beneficent beasts of prey, perfectly capturing the two-faced nature of the politicians. Finally, note the anaphora. That's the repetition of the word or at the beginning of consecutive lines. This emphasizes the endless, trivial complaints of the wealthy city dwellers. Make sure you note these down, they are extremely important. All right, you have grasped the text and the emotions perfectly. Now it's time to consolidate your understanding. Let us look at how you will be tested on this with some specific NCERT focus questions. When writing your long answer responses, examiners are specifically looking for these core themes. You absolutely must write about rural poverty and deprivation, contrasting it with urban selfishness and apathy. Use the exact phrase economic inequality. Mention the political hypocrisy and false promises of the greedy good-doers, and always conclude with the overarching theme of human suffering and the poet's own emotional helplessness. Weaving these exact phrases into your answers will guarantee you maximum marks. Here is a very common board question. What is the childish longing and why is it vain? The answer is quite straightforward. The childish longing is the innocent, immature, and continuous wait of the villagers at their open window, eagerly expecting a city car to stop and buy their goods. It is vain, meaning unfruitful or useless, because the selfish city folks never actually stop to make a purchase, leaving the villagers endlessly disappointed. Another important question asks about the poet's insufferable pain. Frost states that the hurt to the scenery isn't his main complaint, but rather the trusting sorrow of what is unsaid. The villager's silent, broken trust causes him immense pain. He is so overwhelmed that he says, "I can't help owning the great relief it would be to put these people out one stroke out of their pain." He feels an almost irrational, desperate desire to end their suffering immediately, which just shows the incredible depth of his agonizing sympathy. And this thought brilliantly illustrates the core message of our lesson today. The poem reminds us that progress without compassion creates suffering. The polished traffic moving so fast on the highway represents modern progress. But because it completely lacks compassion for the humble roadside stand, it leaves behind a tragic trail of silent sorrow and stark inequality. I want to leave you with a thought that goes far beyond your syllabus. Look at the world around you today. We still have the polished traffic, and we definitely still have the roadside stands everywhere. How can we, as an educated generation, bridge this gap in our own society? How do we bring compassion back to progress? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, students. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I will see you in the next lesson.